everyone, and thank you for joining me in the final presentation slash training on domestic violence. Again, my name is Lydia Phelps. I am one of the MSW interns within the regulatory and licensing section. This presentation is brought to you by SurvivorLink in partnership with AmeriCorps, whose mission is to build capacity within MSW practicum placements across the United States in order to better respond to domestic violence. The title of this training is Safety Planning and Referrals. During this training, we're going to talk about what is safety planning, when safety plans are appropriate, what is included in safety plans, and some local and national resources. So again, please scan this QR code and fill out the pre-test survey. If you're unable to scan the QR code, please click on the link in the email. This is very important. I need this to verify that I provided these trainings to my practicum placement in order to get credit for participating in SurvivorLink. It is also how SurvivorLink gets feedback and sees how they can improve or whether or not these trainings are effective. Again, make sure you're spelling out your agency name and not using acronyms, paying attention to the spelling of your name so your pre-test can be linked to your post-test, and also putting in my name, Lydia Phelps, as the trainer. So pause this video now and fill out the pre-test survey. So who can be involved in domestic violence? We talked about this in the first training, Domestic Violence 101. Anyone can experience domestic violence. Victims and abusers can be any age, gender, and relationship. Perpetrators of domestic violence can be a partner, a spouse, a parent, a guardian, a roommate, or just any other family member or cohabitant. Anyone living in the same household can experience domestic violence. So what is a safety plan? This is a link to a YouTube video that explains more in depth about safety plans. For some reason, my computer doesn't record the audio when I play this video, so I've linked it in the email. So again, pause this video, click on that link, and go watch that video. It's a very long video, like 17 minutes, but please only watch it to like the 5 or 6 minute mark to kind of get a general understanding of what a safety plan is. And once you've watched that, come back to this video and we'll continue with the training. So what can safety planning for survivors look like? It should be a personalized plan to keep a survivor of domestic violence safe. It's supposed to be an ongoing conversation between an advocate or a social worker and a survivor regarding safety. It may or may not be in the form of a written document. I want to pause here. Why is it not a good idea to have a written document? Or why wouldn't that be a good idea? So, it wouldn't be a good idea because the abuser may be able to get their hands on it or see it. And research shows, which we'll talk more about later on in the training, that leaving is the most dangerous time for a victim of domestic violence or intimate partner violence. So, having a piece of paper that shows a plan to leave or a plan documenting abuse or showing that there is abuse can potentially put the survivor in more of a harm's way. So I think it is up to the survivor when it comes to wanting to have a written plan and what exactly they want to do. I think this was another reason why um, SurvivorLink came out with the My Plan app, is to have something discreet on your phone that is less likely to end up in the hands of an abuser. And safety plans should always be developed by and with the survivor. They should be flexible and change depending on the circumstances of the survivor. So if their living arrangement changes, their job changes, any change in their life, the safety plan should reflect that change. A safety plan should be offered as an option. It is the client's choice whether and when they would like to work on one. It's important to be client-centered and client-driven when working with survivors. A a client decides if and when they would work on a safety plan. I know this is a little bit different in the context of child welfare practice because there is the legal mandate and policy that we have to follow in regards to child safety. So I think of this as more of in the context of a domestic violence advocate or another human service provider that is not within child welfare. So the role of the advocate is to provide options and the client decides what is included. So essentially an advocate, a social worker, a human services professional is providing the victim with knowledge and resources, and the client is given the opportunity to curate their plan and choose that how to use that knowledge and resources how they see fit. And the reason for this is we're trying to give as much autonomy as we can back to victims, as this is something that's severely restricted within a domestic violence relationship. So, when are safety plans appropriate? So, to answer this question, let's look at some domestic violence statistics. So, like I said earlier, the most dangerous time for a survivor or victim is when they leave the abusive partner. And 77% of domestic violence related homicides occurred upon separation. And post-COVID, 75% increase of violence upon separation for at least 2 years. And stalking and other forms of abuse may increase post-separation. Safety planning for someone who wants to leave should be done prior to leaving the abusive situation, as there is a lot of risk involved during that time. So what if someone wants to stay in the relationship? Because as we know, not everyone wants to leave an abusive relationship, and oftentimes it takes several times. I believe the number that's commonly used is 7 times on average to leave an abusive partner. So safety planning can include planning for someone who wants to stay in a relationship. I know, when I had an in-home caseload and I was working with families where domestic violence was one, of the safety concerns, and they were staying in the relationship, and I was closing the case or, what have you was happening, what the agency decided it wasn't a big enough risk for the children to come into care, I would always sit down with the partner alone, the victim in the relationship, the one that was being the violence was being perpetuated against. And we would verbally together come up with a safety plan. If violence were to happen again, what is your plan? So what does safety planning look like for clients who want to stay? We have to think about the emergencies that clients may face when they're staying with an abusive partner. So it's important the situation of an emergency, having a clear plan and some preparation to help the survivor and their children, if there are children involved, maintains safety. So if there are children involved in the home, they should have an age appropriate safety plan. So as the lens of a child welfare social worker, I think that that safety plan should always center around how are you going to keep your children safe. Another reason why, or the main reason I would say that victims often stay with their abusers is due to multiple reasons, but some of the barriers that we see to victims who may want to leave or uh, but they just can't, as these are some of the barriers they're facing. Um, Starting with that fear, again, going back to when someone is leaving their abusive partner, that's when they're at highest risk of homicide. So that fear of that, especially if they know that research or that statistic. Isolation, they may be so far separated from their friends or family that they feel they don't have any personal supports, or they may not have any personal supports to rely on to leave the relationship. They may still be in love with their abuser and want to work things out. They may have children and may be concerned about the outcomes of custody or child welfare involvement. Concern about physical harm, going back to that fear. Their partner may be threatening to commit suicide if they leave them. They may not have the financial means to support themselves or their children if they leave their partner. They may not know what resources are available, or there may not be any resources available for them. We often run into the issue of beds being full at shelters. That is a problem across the United States. There's often hope that their partner will change. I feel like I saw this a lot, especially in my in-home cases. The victim in the domestic violence relationship saw that their partner may be working their case plan, like getting mental health treatment, getting substance use treatment, participating in strong fathers or whatever the resource is, and thinking that their partner will change this time because they're engaging in services. Being concerned about their partner's well being, thinking that their partner won't be able to take care of themselves without them. Um, a failure of the criminal legal system. We talked about this in one of the previous training. Um, how victims sometimes are charged because they themselves became violent in the relationship as an act of defense or an attempt to stop the abuse altogether, or they may have had negative experiences with child welfare or just any of those big governmental systems not adequately being able to protect victims of domestic violence. There's also cultural, religious, or family reasons that people remain in relationships where there's abuse. Um, More conservative or conservative religions, conservative cultures, conservative families, it's looked down upon divorce or separation, and there it's viewed that you stay together no matter what. And a shame or belief that the abuse is their fault, thinking that if they just did better, then they wouldn't be abused by their partner. Immigration status is another complex barrier, that fear of deportation, that they would rather face the abuse every day than run the risk of being deported. Nowhere to go. This is a link to another video in Maricopa County in Arizona, which is where a Survivor Link initially started and where some of the staff members in Survivor Link previously worked, and the issues they were running into with shelters being full. Again, I'm not sure why the audio isn't recording, but I will put this link in the email as well if you care to watch it. It's about a 3-minute video. So what is included in a safety plan? It's a plan for security during a violent incident. So this could look like creating a code word with friends, family, or neighbors that they either text, message, call, and tell them to let them know a violent incident is occurring. Maintaining proximity to an exit, knowing how you can leave the house quickly and safely during a violent incident, or as quickly and as safely as you possibly can. Knowing where you can seek healthcare for injuries, so, like, knowing where the closest emergency room or urgent care is, knowing what the hours are, for to seek, healthcare services, and should always, always seek healthcare services or emergency services for strangulation. Firearm safety, this is a big one, especially in child welfare. Having a conversation with victims about whether or not guns are in the house, and are these guns unloaded? Are they locked up in a safe location? And of course, my child welfare perspective, are they out of access of the children? But and maybe having a conversation with the survivor too. Are you able to access the gun? Are you able to make sure that it's unloaded, so that they can't access it later in a violent incident and the gun is already unloaded? Safety planning can also look like having a bag ready to go. This bag could include necessities like clothing and toiletries, extra keys, important documents, and having a conversation with the survivor about where they want to keep this or where they feel is the best location, whether that be um, a location at home, a location in their car, at a friend's house, a family member's house, at work, wherever they feel is the best location for them to keep it. Some important documents to keep together when safety planning would include birth certificates, security cards, immigration documents, children's records such as medical and school, financial information, and again, having a conversation with the survivor, asking them where they feel it would be best to keep these, whether that be in the car, should they make copies of these things. Another thing that I think is often overlooked and underserved, especially in the realm of shelters, is pets. Because I don't even know of any shelter that would allow a pet to come. Um, and I know for myself, my pets are very important to me. I would never leave my pets in a situation where they were unsafe, and this can often be a reason why people do not leave their abuser. Because some people's pets are like their children. So creating a safety plan for them too, like finding out where the pet can go, if you need to leave quickly, keeping extra food and supplies available for them. And then there's also creating age appropriate child safety plans. Think about what should the child do if violence starts and what should they tell children? Are the children old enough and mature enough to understand what's going on? I do think it's important that once a child is old and mature enough that they know how to call 911. They know what neighbors to approach in case of an emergency. They know what safe adults that they can contact, that they have phone numbers memorized of people that they can call in case of an emergency. All of these are very important in the context if you are going to remain in a relationship where there is violence happening and there's children involved. We need they as that is my child welfare perspectives, ensuring that children are at the front and center of any safety plan. And moving on to security within the workplace. So, does this look like telling your boss about what's going on, keeping a copy of a protective order at work, and or letting security know if security is at your job? Some kind of plan with a supervisor or coworker should be considered in case the abuser shows up at work. These are things that maybe people aren't thinking about because their mind is just focused on fight or flight when you're in an abusive relationship. But thinking about what are you going to do if the abuser shows up at work? Do you have someone at work that you trust to tell them about and someone you can reach out to if you need that additional support? All right, well, that concludes talking about safety planning. Now we're going to move on to some resources. So, one thing I wanted to focus on was domestic violence protective orders, or 50B. And the reason I wanted to focus on this is because filing for protective orders, and it varies across states. So this process is a little bit different than what I was used to, like when I lived in Virginia. So I had to learn this and tell it to my clients because I didn't, when people were saying 50B, and I had no idea what that meant when I first started working in North Carolina. So I took all of this information from the nccourts.gov website. So hopefully all of this information is up to date. So they describe a DVPO as a court order that requires a perpetrator, sorry, of domestic violence to stay away from the victim. Law enforcement can arrest a perpetrator of on the spot for violating the order. One thing that's recommended is for someone to keep a copy of their DVPO on them at all times, whether that be in the car, in your purse, just have multiple copies in different areas. So if the perpetrator shows up, you immediately have that piece of paper to show law enforcement so that they can arrest them on the spot. So, and North Carolina also has permanent DVPOs, and I say permanent because it only lasts up to a year, but they can be renewed for up to 2 years at a time. And some language that goes along with the DVPO, and I think often people they get these terms confused or they just don't know what they mean because it's very much legal jargon, but plaintiff is the person who files the protective order and the defendant is the person the order is filed against. So a DVPO is not a criminal conviction and it does not appear on a criminal record. However, those documents are public record and you can be arrested and charged for violating the DVPO. So, what does filing for a DBPO in North Carolina look like? Anyone can file for a DVPO, and these are the categories of relationships that you need to have in order to file a DVPO on that other person. So you can file it against someone who is a current spouse or an ex-spouse, someone you currently or previously live with, a person with whom you have a child, a person of the opposite sex with whom you have a dating relationship, a parent, a child, a grandparent, or a grandchild. So, do you notice anyone not included that might be important to include as far as relationships to a perpetrator of domestic violence? Because the one that I saw was this one right here, a person of the opposite sex with whom you have a dating relationship. That doesn't, it explicitly says opposite sex on nccourts.gov. So that definitely excludes people who are in same sex relationships that need to file a DVPO. They do have up here currently or previously lived with, but there are people in same sex relationships that do not live with each other and where domestic violence is occurring. North Carolina does have another option that for people that don't have a qualifying relationship, which is a no contact order or a 50C. However, the defendant would not be arrested for violating the order. So essentially, it's just a piece of paper. And qualifying domestic violence is causing or attempting to cause physical injury, and this is per definition from NC Court's website, placing in fear of imminent serious bodily injury, continued harassment, and sexual assault. So here are some resources specific to North Carolina. This is the website where I pulled all of the information from this slide. So it has a lot more information, as you can see here, as far as legal aid, enforcement, renewal. So this is definitely a good resource to have when someone has questions about protective orders and legal stuff. And as far as resources like advocacy, shelters, NC Coalition, uh, NC Coalition Against Domestic Violence is an excellent resources. It's kind of an all-in-one location. You can scroll down here and there's the different counties in North Carolina. So you can just click on a random county and it'll pull up the services that service that county. And they also have a list of more community resource guides, information, thrift store directory, interventions. So an excellent resource here, and that's North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And then I also have the link to legal aid. I know in child welfare, I often saw people face the barrier of having no legal representation in custody and DVPO situations. And because lawyers are extremely expensive and financial dependence is a part of, or financial abuse is a big part of domestic violence. So legal aid is definitely a good resource for obtaining legal representation. And again, Knowing community resources is important. It's an ongoing thing. I'm constantly learning about new things in the area, sharing that knowledge with your colleagues, with your families, and your friend. Community is how we heal. It's how we help each other. So again, it's so important to be knowledgeable about resources in your area. And that brings us to the end of my third and final domestic violence training. Here is the QR code for the post test. The link, the direct link for it should also be in the email. Please, please, please fill that out. Again, make sure you're paying attention to the spelling of your name, that it matches the exact same with the pretest. Put my name as the trainer, Lydia Phelps, spell out your agency, and thank you very much. And also reach out to me with any questions or concerns. If there was something I said during this presentation or training that you have more questions about, or you just want to talk to me about, I'm always open to those types of conversations, and also knowing how I can do better, what I can educate myself on more. If you have some resources you think are important to share, please reach out. If you want more resources from me, please reach out. I have a wealth of information that SurvivorLink has shared with us, and I'm always willing to delineate that amongst my practicum placement. So thank you again, and farewell.